Here we have to find the exact value of this expression, that being arctangent of -1, or the inverse of tangent of -1. So how do we do this? Another way we can write this is by saying tangent of what value is equal to -1. And so what we really mean is if we draw a unit circle, we're just really looking for the value that has a point where the y over x is equal to -1. There are a few points that I can think of. So this part of like choosing the points is just something that you get from memorizing a unit circle and kind of having an idea of where the points are. I think of an x, right? An x that crosses my unit circle, and that x is going to have a point. And so this is 1 point, and it's going to be square root 2 over 2, and they're all square root 2 over 2. Okay, so this one is positive x, positive y, so it stays the same. This one is negative x, positive y, so this one's a negative, square root 2 over 2. This one's negative x, and then negative y, so both of them are negative. And then over here, this is x and then negative y, so the y is negative. So I know those points, and I also know a few other points, such as point 0, 1, point -1, 0, point 1, 0, and then point 0, -1. Now, given these points, we can figure out what points. Now, given these points, we can figure out what points, given the y and x, and dividing them together is equal to -1, right? And so I know for a fact, right, using your normal rules that you learned in elementary school, that when you divide a positive by a negative, is going to be a negative. And when you divide a positive by a positive, is going to be a positive. If you divide a positive, well, yeah, that's it. So it's either going to be a positive or one is going to be negative, like so. This one's going to give me negative, this is going to be negative, this one's going to be positive. And so I need, right, that at least one and only, well, this one gives you positive. So I can only have one of the values, either x or y, be negative, but both of them cannot be negative because then it's just going to give me a positive, and both of them cannot be positive because then that's just going to be a positive, and I'm looking for a -1, right? So automatically I know I can narrow down that one of my x's need to be either one of my x's, I mean, one of the variables need to be negative, but only one of them. And so I can immediately cross out this one because I know that for that one, both of them are negative, so that's not going to work out. All right. And then I can also cross out this one because both of those are positive, and that's going to give me a positive, so that's not going to work out. Right. So my only options here, actually, I can continue. Let's see. Here, this one, both of these are positive. And let's see, both of these are positive. And if we take, now we also have to think about like what would make it undefined. So for example, if you have a 0 in the denominator, that makes it undefined. And so we can't have any zeros in the denominator. So we have to do y over x. So if we're taking this point, we're going to do 0 over -1. Well, that's just 0. So first of all, it doesn't even give us -1, so that's out even if, it's not undefined. We can take, let's say, 0, -1, so it's going to be -1 over 0. That's undefined, right? So it can't be that one, right? And so we're really just left with these points over here. We need to figure out the values, right? Like, what is the value of these points? Because these are just the points, these are the coordinates, but we want to know the value because that's the value that goes right in here. All right, so here's how I know this. In my x, right, all of the points end in 4. I'm not even going to bother doing this one. So this one ends in 4, this one ends in 4, and all the numerators have a pi, right? And so the way that I memorize this one is, okay, this one's above the x-axis, so I'm just going to think the opposite. I'm going to think negative, and so I'm just going to subtract 1 from the denominator just because it's negative. So that's that. So that's 3 pi over 4. And then the way I remember this one is 5 days a week I go to 7-Eleven. I learned that from a girl on YouTube. So this one would just be 7 because it would be 5 days a week, 7-Eleven. So those are the other ones, but we're just going to focus on what we need right now. So that's 7/11. So we have to choose between 3 pi over 4 or 7 pi over 4 and figure out which one actually gives us -1, right? When we put it into tangent, when we figure out the tangent of that point. So the way we do this, right, we figure out the tangent of the point is we do y over x, and we have our y's and we have our x, right? So let's just figure out both of the points. Let's do 3 pi over 4. So we take our y, which is the square root of 2 over 2, and we divide by negative square root 2 over 2. You don't even have to do any math. You know that these are the same, and so literally it's 1, and then you have a negative left over, so it's -1. So this one is a point. Let's check in the other one. So this one is square root 2 over 2. Well, it's y over x, right? So it's negative square root 2 over 2 over square root 2 over 2. Again, you know these are the same. It's going to be 1, and then just bring down the negative. So this one is also -1. Now we have a problem. We have two values, and we don't know which one to choose. And this is where my star points come in. So stars are basically just things that you have to remember or memorize or know in order to solve these problems, like the fact that the range for the arctangent function is -pi/2 to pi/2. And how does that help us? Because you would also have to know that this is pi/2 and this is -pi/2. Okay? And so that just means that our y values, right? Any y values that we have, they have to be in between -pi/2 and pi/2, as in these quadrants, right? So it has to be between quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. But not between. It's either has to be in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4. And so we have to say, okay, well, that just cancels out this one because this is obviously not in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4. And then you might make the mistake of saying, okay, well, then you know what? 7 pi over 4 is my answer. But that's wrong because if that's going to be your answer, then that's going to go over here. And what you're saying over here is that the inverse of tangent of -1 is 7 pi over 4. But you have to remember that if you put an x and this is your y, and you know that your y's can't be less than -pi/2 or greater than pi/2, then you know that this isn't your answer. You know why? Because if you take the calculator and you go ahead and put 7 pi, divide that by 4, that's 5.49. 5.49, right? What is pi divided by 2? Pi divided by 2 is 1.5. So really, our range is -1.5 to 1.5. And so 5.4 or 5.5 rounded is definitely not within this range. And therefore, you can't say that the inverse of tangent of -1 is 7 pi over 4 because you're basically saying that, hey, it's 5.4, which can't be because the y cannot be greater than 1.5, right? So you have to take an equivalent value, which in this case would be -pi/4. How do I know that? Because pi/4 is over here, and this is just the same point. It's not the same value, but it has the same point, and that's what we care about. And so if you're doing pi/4, right, pi/4 is 0.7. 0.7 is, right, in between here. And so you can say that pi/4 is and lies on the graph of the arctangent because it satisfies the range. And so that's how you would do this problem.